It's your stage. Thank you very much for being with us, ma'am.
Thanks, JV. Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
2022. So tonight, we are going to talk about some ideas to kick off your new year. And of course, this can be for all year long, but I wanted to inspire you guys with some interesting tips. So the first way we're going to start this out is to ask you a question. Why are you looking for a new job? Now, I gave you two responses. You can have many: to earn a paycheck or to make a bigger impact. And I'd like you to put in the chat box one or both or something else. Just chat me. Why are you looking for a new job? Or you can open up your mic. Paycheck? Who else? Just chat. Paycheck and a bigger impact? Who else? All right. Earn a paycheck right now, but hope to make a bigger impact at this point in my life. Okay, so there's obviously a both here. This is not an either or. However, especially for those of you who are learning to want to make a bigger impact, here's what I have to say to you. You can impact the world, not just your life, not just the life of your coworkers. You can impact the world through your work. Anybody know about the butterfly effect? A butterfly flaps his wings on one side of the world. There's a hurricane on the other side of the world. There's a ripple effect in everything you do. I believe that work is service. It's actually why the tagline of my company is, for every hire, there's a higher purpose. I believe that with my whole heart, that God has given us divine gifts to help the world, to serve the world, to love the world through the work that we do every single day. And yes, we need to put food on the table. And absolutely, that's a perfectly valid reason to be searching for a job. But I also believe that there is a higher purpose in what you do. So how do you do that, right? So these are some of the tips that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And the first one is what I'm calling becoming a brand builder. What in the world does that mean? Well, branding comes from the world of marketing, for those of you who are in the marketing world. And it really has to do with showcasing your value. So a company would build a brand, and they're going to showcase their value to their customers. So Nike or Starbucks or Apple, right? They all have brands. They're all good companies, but they have different kinds of brands for different kinds of customers. They don't all service the same customer in the same way, right? So for example, what would be the difference between Nordstrom's brand versus Tom's of Maine, right? So Nordstrom is going to really emphasize customer service. Tom's of Maine is going to emphasize be eco-friendly, right? And so you also want to be thinking about your brand. So there are three questions that I want you to be considering when you're thinking about your brand. Number one, who do you want to serve? Who do you want to notice that put that word serve in there? Service. That has to do with making an impact. Who do you want to serve? Now your who is going to be your target audience. That's going to be the type of employer. Now for some of you, you have an industry or a sector that you serve. Not all of you. Some of you have an industry or a sector. So maybe it's very broadly the nonprofit sector or the government or corporate. Those are very, very generic. But normally, if you have a sector, it's a little bit more specific than that. It's the commercial real estate sector. It's the consumer packaged goods, it's government contracting, it's financial services, right? Some of you, or in the nonprofit space, there are a lot of different kinds of nonprofits. There are charitable nonprofits, there are trade associations, environmental NGOs, right? Some of you have a sector or an industry that you want to serve. If you know that, your brand needs to be focused on them. Why? Because those are the people who need to know how you can help them. Every employer is looking for a unicorn, or sometimes in recruiting, we say a purple squirrel. Somebody who checks 12 out of 10 boxes. I did not just misspeak, okay? 12 out of 10 boxes. Why? Because they're trying to minimize their risk in the hire. And in so doing, they really love it when a job seeker speaks their language, understands their challenges, understands what keeps that sector up at night. To the extent that you can do that in your resume, in your LinkedIn, in any thought leadership, anything out there that says to the world, I am part of your community, will make that employer feel safe, make them feel like you belong to their community. Now, some of you don't have an industry or a sector. Some of you are cross-sectoral, and that's perfectly fine. Even so, you still need to know who your target is, what kind of employer you want to help. And then there's how do you want to serve? right? So your how really has to do with your skills and your superpowers. And what kinds of skills do you want to serve with? So that could be hard skills, that can also be soft skills. So your hard skills or your functional skills is the things that you do, right? You do marketing, you do accounting, you do research, what have you. And your soft skills are how you do what you do. Your soft skills. So, maybe you have an entrepreneurial spirit, or you're strategic, or you're very detailed or organized or analytical. But in either way, be thinking about your brand, be thinking about the value that you bring to the table, so that as you lace that through your resume, your LinkedIn, your networking calls, your interviews, right? Every aspect of your job search needs to encompass how you do what you do. What is the value that you provide? And then finally, why do you want to serve, right? So why often has to do with your mission. So I mentioned that my tagline is, for every hire, there is a higher purpose. And I believe that, and that it really is my why, because I do believe that people have divine gifts to be used for service. And then I also believe that employers and job seekers should have a mutual purpose when they come into work together. So you may not have a small business like I do, but you may have a why. What is the impact you want to make? Why do you do what you do? Be thinking about that. And then leverage LinkedIn, leverage your resume to showcase your brand. And I'm going to be sharing with you a couple of examples. Some of you have seen similar presentations from me before, may have seen this already. This is just another kind of way to reframe it. And what I'm going to do first and foremost is show you a sample from a classic resume that I would write, because I'm a career coach. I'm not just a recruiter, I'm a career coach. And I write resumes, I write LinkedIn profiles. So I'm showing you a couple of proprietary samples. The first one that I want to show you, and this is a real resume, but it's sanitized information, right? It's a 5551212 number, okay? And you'll notice here that I started with a career headline. There, to me, remember, ask 5 resume writers how to write a resume, you'll get 7 different responses. But in my opinion, it's very, very helpful for a recruiter when you have a career headline. Why? It's like the top of an advertising document. It frames the whole document, sharing with people what you want to do. And so notice here that there are two noticeable things. One is the sector and one is the profession. So I put nonprofit marketing communications leader, not just marketing communications leader. In fact, that actually was the original title of this, but I put the nonprofit in there because I wanted to show you, for those of you who are sectorally focused, it's very, very helpful to have that in there. I'll give you a live example. Right before this call, a couple hours before this call, I was coaching somebody, a coaching client of mine, and we did a resume, and she happens to be in the association community. And she works for what's called a state association. So it's the South Carolina Association of fill in the blank, okay? Well, she's applying to a national organization in a government relations advocacy kind of a role. When she and I first did her resume, we put, for this, right at this headline, we put state association leader. And that made sense as on a generic level, because she is a state association leader, and we made it fairly generic. But now she has a very specific job that she's applying for right this hot second, okay? And that wouldn't be good enough, because number one, she's applying to a national organization. So she's not going to emphasize the word state. But what she is going to emphasize is the fact that she comes from the transportation sector. Why? Because the association is in the transportation sector. So we put transportation association leader. Does that make sense? Okay. So we put the sector there so that it's like, boom, in a nanosecond, the employer is gonna fixate on that and say, oh God, she gets it. She gets it. And then here, I have this digital media strategist, inbound marketer, content developer. Look, there are lots of different things you can do. This happens to be my style. You don't have to use it to borrow this, but it's sometimes a little bit helpful to have some sort of branding language to show the employer kind of how you show up, maybe what your mindset is, maybe highlight some skills. That's an interesting place to do it. And then you'll notice here a text box, and the text box has some key competencies. And you'll see on the next slide that I weave those in to bullets. And the reason why this is important is because employers are extremely key word focused. You've probably heard this from me and from a lot of other people. It's all about the keywords. Going back to my client, we're going to be changing her text box, and we're going to be adding in some competencies that are on the job description that are appropriate for her, but happen not to be on the original resume. So the point of this little slide here is you must customize your resume for every single job, period. Not 50% of the jobs, not 75% of the jobs, absolutely every single one. The employer is expecting you to do that. If you don't, you're asking them to be a mind reader, and they're not. If you give them a generic looking resume, the kind of your standard, they have to do too many mental gymnastics to figure out, are you a fit for the job that they've posted? And in that job description, you're going to find layer after layer of all kinds of keywords. And that's what you want to focus on, especially at the end of the job posting, where it says requirements or qualifications. They're giving you a clue there. They're putting in the keywords for you. So in the case of my client, they use words like they want someone who does regulatory analysis or coalition building. I'm like, great, client, let's, to the extent that was true for her, let's go ahead and replace some of the keywords here with the language that they use, right? And then the second section, some people call this professional experience. I just like professional highlights. You'll notice here that these are all labeled. So there's two things about this. Number one, there's labels. So the labels marry up to the other text box. And why this is important is because when a recruiter scans down the resume, and by the way, they don't read, they scan. They don't read, they scan. Most people scan these days. They don't have time to read. They want those keywords to catch, right? Kind of pop off the page. And the other thing you'll notice here is these are actual accomplishment stories. They're not job duties, not responsibilities. They're once upon a time stories. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Okay, so this is another place where you want to customize your resume. Not only the text box, not only the career headline, but also these particular labels. Label all of your accomplishment stories. Okay, so the next thing I want to share with you is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a wonderful place to showcase your brand. And there's a career headline too that they have right underneath the picture. You want to be really intentional about what you put in that headline so that you have the right keywords that match what you're looking for, but also that recruiters can find you. Because recruiters are looking for you all the time and they're typing in keywords. They want a marketing executive, they'll type in marketing or digital marketing or, marketing VP, or they'll do a lot. They'll play with the search bar in the upper left-hand corner. You want to be found. So make sure that you know your brand and you know the kind of job you're looking for. And that's what's got to go up there. But the about section, okay, is really, really important. Okay, so the about section is where you can tell your professional story. Now, again, I happen to be a copywriter, and so I write these for my clients. I have a particular style. I'm sharing this with you just to inspire you, just so that you can be thinking a little bit more broadly, a little more creatively, than what a lot of people do. Most LinkedIn about sections are kind of like that little, what I call a generic bio. 25 years of experience doing blah, blah, blah. Nothing wrong with that per se, but it's not very compelling. Right? So if you have a sensibility for writing, you don't have to write it this way, but you may want to do something a little more interesting than just here's what I've done, and tell people why you do what you do. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. And this particular person is in the what she calls the environmental justice sort of sector. And I'm going to read this to you. It's very, very small, so you can get the concept. And this is because she's very sectorally focused. She's a researcher, but she's in that particular sector. So here's what we wrote. Environmental justice is social justice. As millions of people around the world protest political inaction as the most pressing environmental and economic issues of our time, air and water pollution, climate change, oceanic microplastics, their livelihoods and their health are in jeopardy. This intractability is thwarting real change. How do we compel policymakers to move the needle? By turning policy agendas into concrete plans of action. That's where I come in. While global leaders talk about big ideas, I'm behind the scenes, researching problems, framing solutions, and convening power players to shift the narrative. Because at the end of the day, it's all about execution. Tools in my toolkit, and then we listed out several of her key competencies, like research and analysis, saying, synthesizing and translating technical data into accessible and digestible communication forms. So it's like almost like a definition of that competency, and you'll see several below. And then at the bottom is a section called About Me, and this is more about her soft skills. I guide teams toward inclusive decision making. I listen to needs, concerns, and knowledge. I listen to the needs, concerns, and knowledge of each stakeholder, so forth and so on, okay? So this is a style. You can do what you like, but I really want to encourage you to write something compelling. Now, it doesn't have to be sectorally focused. Here's one for an IT professional. I'm an IT support professional who believes in the power of service, right? So he's a customer service focused IT person. Technology is the lifeblood of business, hidden from view, but vital to survival. The lightning pace of change has fueled the need for reliable, rapid backend support. End users need a savvy and relational IT sleuth to navigate the maze of hardware, software, cloud, and cybersecurity issues, and they need to get back to work fast. And then we kind of go in here, right, in terms of how he kind of cyber sleuth he thinks that he is, and his relationship building skills, right? And then because he's an IT person, we put all of his technical skills right at the bottom so people understood kind of what he does, all right? So this, again, this is just a drop in the bucket for you, just to inspire you to think a little bit differently about how you are branding yourself in your resume and in your LinkedIn. Okay, so that was tip number 1. Tip number 2, now we're going to get a lot more relational. That was sort of practical stuff. The rest of my presentation is very relational. So become a relationship-focused networker. What do I mean by that? Oftentimes when one is in a job search, most people have what I'll call like an open hand, right? Open hand meaning put something in it. Hey, give me a job, right? So when you have a networking call, it's, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for, got a job, got a job, got a job. When you're a relationship-focused networker, you're in it for the mutual benefit. It's not just about you, it's about them too. It's about figuring out ways that you can solve their problems, not just so that they can solve yours. That's what a relationship is. Because if not, listen up here, if it wasn't a relationship, it would be a transaction, right? That's the difference between a relationship, which is mutual, versus something one-sided, then it's just a transaction. And people know when they feel like it's a transaction. And so my recommendation here, and this is a methodology I'm going to teach you now, is what I call knowing who's in your family tree. And that'll make sense in just a minute. And then once you do, then cultivate mutually beneficial relationships. So what do I mean by a family tree? Well, to me, there are 2 kinds of people in your family tree. Actually 3, but 2 major ones. People who know you and people who get you. Now, the people who get you can be people who get you by profession and people who get you by industry. So I'm going to make this real for you right now, right? So first, let's talk about the people who know you. So the family tree concept is twins, siblings, first cousins, and second cousins. And I share this with you because first of all, it's a wonderful way to prioritize your networking, but it also gives you a sense as to who you're talking to. Who's this person on the other side? So who's your twin, right? Your twin is somebody who knows you by voice. I say family, best friend, basically someone who's going to dance at your wedding, or, well, if you have one right now because of COVID, or help you pack. You know who those people are. You don't even have to, you just say, hey, it's me. That's the kind of relationship you have. And these are the people who are your biggest champions. They are tripping over themselves to help you. They can't help you fast enough. They're like, JV, you're my best buddy in the world. You're looking for a job, and I will do anything. I will proactively help you, right? Proactively. They're going to look for people. They're going to introduce you, those people. Your siblings are similar, very similar. They know you by first name, maybe a close colleague, right? So actually, I could pick up the phone and call JV, say, hey, JV, it's Shira, right? Couldn't I do that, JV? Right? I could. And JV would help me, or JV could call me and I would help him. I mean, we're friends. We're very friendly. So it's that kind of thing. So be thinking those people also are they really, really want to help you. They're very proactive. Okay. Your first cousins are a past relationship, what I call a very warm connection. That's the blast from the past people, the dormant relationships. You haven't talked to them in 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, and it feels like yesterday. Oh my gosh, Gail, it's been forever. Hey, Shira, it's been 10 years. How's it going? And you catch up as if no time has passed. But that's because at some point you had a warm relationship, right? In fact, for those of you who may not know, I know some of you on this call do, every Friday morning since last August, I've been leading a group called Higher Moment Mastermind. It's an open Q&A, free, similar to CNN, but different because it's not a presentation. It's just open Q&A. And one of the guest experts that I have on the call is a guy named Vern Schellinger. And Vern and I knew each other years ago through the human resources community, but we were both part of a human resource association, a local chapter. And literally we had not seen each other in like 10 years. Well, as it turns out, there was somebody on we call it HMM, our HMM call, who happened to be doing some coaching with him. Her name was Melissa. And she said, hey, hey, Vern, this Friday morning meeting I go, and he goes, oh, I'm really interested. Who runs it? She says, Shira, it's my name. He goes, Shira, I haven't talked to Shira forever. He calls me out of the blue and he goes, Shira, Melissa just told me about this group. How are you? Literally from that day, he became my core guest expert. Every single week I see Vern now. And actually, so Vern turned from a first cousin to a sibling. just like that, just like that. And so now we're buddies, text, the whole thing. Like he's a friend now because of that resurrected relationship. And then a second cousin is a past relationship, past acquaintance, friendly but not close. That's the person you call and say, hey, Debbie, you and I met at the conference back in the, right, Shira, right, okay. It wasn't a relationship, it was just an acquaintance. And I mention this because these are levels of connection that you want to be aware of when you are networking, because the people who are closest to you are going to be more, who are going to want to help you. The people you're less close to may be willing to help you. But at the end of the day, the level of relationship matters. It matters how you communicate, how you engage with people, and especially the people who are past acquaintances. And by the way, I didn't put third cousin down here. If there was such a thing on my list, it really would be people who you don't know at all. And that's actually why it's not on this list. But on the other hand, we know that a lot of the people that are third cousins to you, you still need to reach out to. But you know how you do it oftentimes? Through one of your twin siblings, first cousins or second cousins. Okay. And LinkedIn, of course, is a great place to do that. Because if you ever find on LinkedIn a second level connection, what do we know? There's always at least one mutual connection. And that mutual connection is likely one of these 4 categories. Now, it might be somebody you don't know, and I get that. And that's a little bit tricky because if you've never met the person, they're not as willing to help you. In fact, I think there's somebody on this call, I'm not going to mention my name, but there's somebody on this call who today reached out to me and said, hey, Shira, I noticed that you are connected. So the person is applying for a job, a Acme company, right? Noticed that I happen to be connected to, I think it's the hiring manager, a woman named Ann. And so the person on this call said, hey, Shira, I noticed you're connected to Ann. Would you mind, I recently applied, but would you mind forwarding my resume to her for extra consideration? I said, no problem. As it turns out, I happen to really know Ann, like she's a colleague. And so tonight, right before this meeting, shot off a nice, lovely little note. And hopefully this person's resume is going to get noticed because of this mutual connection. All right. So you want to leverage this. But at the end of the day, be thinking about your connections. Now, this one is about people who get you by profession, right? So the first thing you want to be thinking about is your twins. Who are your twins? These are people who do what you do. It is the best referral source that you could possibly have. Why? Because these are the people who are getting called by recruiters all the time, who are listening to an opportunity and the job's not right for them, but it could be right for you. It could be right for you. So, and by the way, I know you might be thinking to yourself, I started out this whole section by saying that about mutual benefit. I will be getting there. Okay. I just want to mention just the relationships, and then we're going to get to the value added side of this, because it absolutely needs to be mutual. But for the moment, I just want you to understand your relationships here. So the people that do what you do are your best referral source. You may not think that though, right? You might be thinking, oh, they're a competitor. They do exactly what I do. Why in the world would I network with a competitor? They are a competitor. They're a competitor, okay? Or some people call it co-opetition, right? So these are your colleagues. In fact, think of it. For any of you who know what the association community is, these membership organizations that we have on every other street corner in DC, these are a bunch of competitors, either people in the same industry or people in the same profession. They're helping each other, they're networking, they're giving advice and ideas and sharing job resources and other kinds of resources, making connections, right? They are a community of people who do similar things. These are your professional twins. Your siblings are people who do something similar to what you do. So let me give you an example. Let's say you are a marketer, right? I've been using this analogy, so I'll keep up with it. You are a marketer. So of course your twins are other marketers of whatever sort. Now, there's different kinds of marketers out there. There's digital marketers, market researchers, but I'll just say marketer in general. Your sibling for marketer would be, I would say, a public relations professional. Now, PR and marketing have some overlap these days, I get it, but a real PR person does not consider themselves a marketer, okay? Nor does a real marketer consider themselves PR, but they're in enough of the same sort of ecosystem where a PR person might likely hear about a marketing opportunity to share with their marketing colleague, okay? So it's a sibling, right? They really understand what that person does. And then the first cousin, I should say, the sibling does something very similar. The first cousin understands. So in this case, I would say a salesperson might be the first cousin to a marketer. First cousin in the sense that they're not directly related, they're not as close as a PR person. A salesperson might hear about an opportunity, not as likely, might. And then finally, a second cousin, somebody who is, familiar with what that person does. So in the case of a marketer, maybe that first second cousin is, oh, I don't know, an HR person, a chief operating officer, right? They're far removed from the marketer, but they know, they've heard about it. They're like, the likelihood of them hearing about an opportunity is pretty slim. Okay. So if I were a marketer, I would not be running after, doing, forging relationships with COOs. But then again, you never know, right? Because your next door neighbor could be one, and that person might have an opportunity, in their office. So don't stay away from them. But in terms of relationship, right? These are some categories you want to think about. And then likewise, when it comes to people who get you by industry. Okay. So here we go again. So I'm going to give an industry that's around here, up the 270 corridor, biotech. Okay. So if you're in the biotech industry, your sibling might be somebody who's in medical equipment manufacturing. All right, close enough, not exactly, but might hear of opportunities. Same thing, a first cousin might be a hospital, not connected to biotech, but it's still kind of healthcare. And finally, I'd say, health and wellness person, way far away from biotech, but loosely. Again, be thinking as you are in your LinkedIn, as you're doing your networking, you're doing your LinkedIn searching, who is in your ether? People who relationally get you, and then people who also get you by profession and by industry. All right. So now I want to talk about a concept. This is going to kind of start to pull this all together. This concept that's called the Go-Giver. All right. The Go-Giver is a book. It's a book that turned into a movement. Started with one book, and now there's like 5. You just go to the Go-Giver. I think it's thegogiver.com or gogiver.com. And it's a little book, easy read. And it's this concept that kind of revolutionized the way a lot of people think about relationship building in business. And there are several concepts here: creating value, touching lives, building networks, being real, and staying open. I was showing you up until now kind of the what. This is the how. This is the how. This is a mind shift. And this is from the website. Okay, everything I've just shown you now, that slide, and then this one. And I'm not going to read all of these to you. You can certainly read them. Feel free to take a picture of this slide if you like. But there are a couple of things here I just want to highlight. This idea of creating value, right? Providing consistent value to people. Touching lives is really as much about how well you serve people. People building networks of people who know you, like you, and trust you, who want to be your personal walking ambassadors. In order to do this, the 4th bullet says you got to be your authentic self. You've got to be genuine. That's why I was saying earlier, this is not about a transaction. This is not about help me get a job. Well, nothing wrong with asking people to help you get a job. But if that's all you're doing, people are going to feel that. They're going to feel that it's one-sided, that's frankly lopsided in the relationship. And so as you're reaching out, you want to be in the mindset that says, how can I help you? How can I help you? Gail, Debbie, Scott, how can I help you? It's not just a matter of how can you help me? People will want to help you. If they're actually going to get on call, they're happy to help typically. Okay. But more than that, when the call opens, this would be a little interesting twist. When you've asked somebody to help you with your job search and you get on the call, what typically happens? The person says to you, the job seeker, so Debbie, how can I help you? So Debbie, what are you looking for? Well, very standard kind of. And Debbie will say, well, I'm looking for this, not that. And what's the relationship? Tips, right? It's nothing, there's nothing wrong with it. People do it all the time. But what would happen if it balanced out? What would happen if Debbie shifted the conversation immediately? And once the person says, so Debbie, what are you looking for? So, I'm happy to share with you, about my job search, but Gail, what I'd really love to know more about now is a little more about you. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile. Looks like you have an interesting background, an interesting career. Tell me a little bit more about what you do. Why do you enjoy working, or do you enjoy working, where you are? And, maybe there's something personal there. They went to a certain school, they live in a certain place, whatever. You open it up with something a little more personal. Level it out and say, and then as they're starting to talk, maybe they mention a challenge, or you even ask about maybe a challenge that they're having. And then you become a resource to them. How about that? How about you say, oh, wow, Gail, it sounds like you've got a challenge in this. I've got a colleague, I've got a friend, I've got a coworker, I've got somebody, I think you need to meet Scott. And what do you do right then? You literally stop and say, how about if I make the introduction right now? Not after the call, when you forget. We all do that. We have very good intentions, then we get on to something else. I do it all the time. Right that hot second. Would you mind if I take 30 seconds? They're like, sure, no problem, right? Because you're helping them. And you literally open up your email and you type it. What I do is I actually read it back to the person and say, is this okay? I'm like, oh, great, sure. Off your plate, you've just helped somebody. And now relationship's much more equal. And at some point they should turn tide back to you and say, okay, Debbie, now really tell me what you're looking for. You've just built warmth. You've built, it's a genuine relationship because you're really trying to help them. This is not a tactic. This is not a technique. This is not a ruse. This is not anything like that. It's truly coming from a genuine place of wanting to help somebody, right? Wouldn't you, if somebody came to you, wouldn't you want that too, right? If somebody asked you for some help, you'd want it to be balanced. You'd want it to be authentic, okay? So now I actually want to open this up for a little bit of a discussion, right? So this is going to talk about how to proactively add value. So here's my question. And I don't want you to, well, you could chat this. I'd rather you open your mics. Here's my first question. In what ways can you add value to your professional network? Or you might rephrase it, in what ways have you ever added value to your professional network? Just open up your mic. I'd like to hear a few people just chat about this. Or if you feel better, you can actually type it out. Who wants to start? In what ways can you add value to your professional network?
Publishing blogs and articles.
Great. Blogs and articles. Okay, so that means that's you putting out your thought leadership to your professional community. Great. What else?
Connecting two people you know that might have value from that connection.
Absolutely. Being a connector. That's right. You see the need and you say, Gail needs to be Debbie, and you put them together somehow, some way. Great. What else?
If I find out about a job fair or a job posting that I think people will be interested in, especially in our C&M community, I post it.
Fantastic. That's great. And I know you do because I've seen you do it. Karen, what else?
Right. I'm from North Carolina. We moved down here to Research Triangle 6 years ago. And after the interest that I've always had with artificial intelligence and computers, there was no networking group down here actually in this IT rich community that was focused on that. So I started one, and it went from 1 to 1,400 people. This was in 2018, 2019.
Wow.
And then 2020, everything shut down because we were meeting physically, but I created a pretty dynamic network, or at least giving all those people value in the monthly events that we had. So
That's
using
fantastic.
the networking skills that I had that somebody named Shira helped me create to create this group. So thank you.
Well, Karen, so you took it. So Bob was just mentioning about being a connector. So what you are called is a convener. It's a different kind of connector. It's a convener. It's pulling a group together, right, for a mutual purpose. That's fantastic. Right before this call, what happened right before this call? I'm finding and giving examples. Right before this call, I saw a colleague write a news. I'm on somebody's newsletter, right? Every week or so, I get this newsletter. It had to do with writing. It was like she was giving tips on how to be a better writer. And I have a colleague who's another writer. And I said to myself, hey, why not share it? Just to inspire him. Not that he wouldn't know this stuff, but you know what? When you share with somebody else what a colleague is doing, it can actually spark ideas. So literally right before this call, hey, John, I just got this newsletter. I thought you'd be interested, right? That all the things that we're talking about are ways you can add value to your professional network. It's easy, doesn't take a lot of time, but you want to be always thinking about your colleagues. You have colleagues, whatever profession you're in. There are people who do what you do, or there are people who are in your same sector who would benefit from hearing about what you know about, right? Learning, experiencing, reading something, right? Maybe there's a seminar that you've heard about. Hey, I thought you'd be interested in this, or a colleague, or again, I think JV said the blogs. There's so many ways you can do this. Be a go-giver, add value all the time, okay? Now, I want to shift this a little bit to your interviews. right? Now for the job seekers in the room, how can you offer strategic value in your interviews? Or how have you ever offered strategic value in your interviews? Who wants to start?
I think what I've found is a lot of different groups actually can leverage the same capabilities or knowledge, but aren't necessarily aware of it. I've recently gotten to human-centered design and user experience, and somehow got into a group called Insights Association, which was originally like really heavy market research, but it's really amazing what they've done as far as innovative ways to do research, like giving people an iPhone or something and just say, go experience this car and record it. And so what I found is you could, back to your, your levels of relationships, your cousins and so forth, the ones that aren't necessarily like you all the way are like enough that could leverage by things other people do, and just at least expose it. Hey, were you aware that this other function or area is doing this? Could you use a piece of that? Does that open up the world in a different light?
And are you suggesting, that's great. It sounds like that could be that's adding value in professional network, but I guess it's also in your interview. So are you suggesting that in your interview, you might actually offer that to the employer, saying like, did you know about this resource?
Yes, if it gets to where they have a challenge,
Yeah.
specific challenge. So it's not just, hey, have you heard?
Right.
It has to, kind of led into by they're hitting an obstacle, or they don't know how. Again, they know the what they have to solve, they just don't know how.
And you're hitting a wonderful, wonderful point, because this is exactly the point of this question. You can only offer strategic value to exactly what you're saying when you understand their urgent challenges. In order for that to happen, you have to ask good, everybody, questions, right? You got to ask good questions. And you've got to do a lot of research before these interviews. Don't just show up with job description in hand and your resume in the other. You need to be scouring the internet, not just reading the website, understanding the website, looking at LinkedIn, looking at what people, looking for colleagues there. Put the name of the association. I work with associations a lot. Put the name of the employer in the search bar, hit enter, and the people who work there are going to come up. Start clicking on profiles, see who does what, read what if the person's filled out their fleshed out their LinkedIn profile, maybe you'll see their responsibilities. Start connecting the dots. Look for press releases. Any tools you can use to start creating a picture, right? A jigsaw puzzle almost, if you will, like putting the pieces together around who this company is, what's their status in the market, maybe new initiative they're working on, anything you can think about, so that you're more prepared when you get to the interview. You can ask really strategic questions, not just, hey, what are your biggest challenges? Although that's a perfectly fine question. That when all else fails, you can always ask that, hey, what's keeping you up at night? No problem. But isn't it even cooler when you can say, I was doing some research on the company. I noticed, I heard, I read about, dot. Can you tell me more about, or the implications of this? Or you start getting some of these challenges from them, and then you creatively come up, that's really interesting. Have you guys ever considered this? Might this work? If I were to be in this role, here maybe is this the way that I could add value? What do you think about doing? And you engage in this game of tennis. Okay. Now I say tennis because normally interviews are racquetball. Anybody know what I mean by that? Q, A. Okay. It's just this one-sided, just hit the ball against the wall and you're the wall. The ball comes back to the employer. Tennis is a conversation. Back and forth, back and forth. You ask, they ask, you ask, and you're engaged in this free-flowing dialogue. So no longer are you sitting there like a very good interviewee with your hands in your lap. Okay, what's the next question? I'm prepared for my SAR stories. Yes, be prepared for your SAR story, situation, action, result. Be prepared for that. But it's more than that. You got to be present in the moment. Listen for the cues. Listen for what's keeping them up. Engage with them as if you already had the job. Because guess what, folks? You'd be doing that anyway if you had the job, right? If you're working with a boss, what are you doing all day long? Playing a game of tennis. There's a challenge and you're helping to solve it. And you've got a challenge, they're helping to solve it. It's back and forth. And that's what I mean by adding strategic value, is making sure that you're thinking about things at a macro level as much as possible, thinking big, thinking broad. How can you help the organization? How can you serve them, right? It's all about service. You've seen the theme here from the very beginning of this talk, all about service, making an impact. You're making an impact on the company, on the industry, on your boss, on your team, on the external stakeholders, on the customers, right? This is what it means to add strategic value. Now, more specifically, what kind of follow-up resources can you offer the hiring manager? Who's got some ideas on this one? Very specifically. Once you've had this interview, what are follow-up resources can you offer them? Anyone?
A portfolio website?
Oh, a portfolio website, meaning of your own work?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. That's absolutely one thing. Yeah, so that would be showing them more of your credentials. Sure, that's one way to look at that question. Sure. What are some other follow-up resources you can share?
I think it's really close to what Eric said. If you solved a real similar problem, again, you can kind of dangle that in front of them. I've done that, or if they're either starting kind of an effort, you'd say, oh yeah, I've done that plus, especially if you've gone way beyond. If you've gone way beyond what they've.
Sure. I think there's actually two ways to read the question, and you guys are focusing on one of those ways. And one of those ways is following up by sharing with them how you have added value to somebody in the past. It's great. Absolutely. You can certainly follow up with that. If you want to, you might even, in fact, I often recommend, and this is even going back to the other question around strategic value, is actually doing a presentation. Now, you wouldn't do that in your first level interview because you may not know enough yet, but for the second or the third level, either hopefully during the interview, and if not during the interview, then it could be afterwards, you do a presentation, right? It's a deck. And in that deck, it can be like a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It could be some sort of analysis, other kind of analysis of the organization, maybe some ideas, and you present to them. Well, I should back up a second. I'm conflating two things. Let me go back. There's what you've done in the past, and there's what your opportunities are in the future. What Eric, and I'm so sorry, I can't see everybody's name, the other gentleman was saying, you're talking about what you've done in the past, your credibility. Here are the kinds of problems I've solved for other employers. Great. That's a follow-up resource. Then there's the future. Here's what I can do for you in the future. If you hired me, this is the kind of value that I could add. So that presentation, whatever, doesn't even have to be a full presentation. It could be an outline, just a document, something that says, I've listened to your challenges. Here are some solutions. Now, you're not saying it in a presumptuous way. Please don't hear me. I'm not saying, here's what I will do. That's presumptuous. Here's what I could do. Here's some suggestions I have, what I might have, some things for consideration. That's how you want to be thinking about anything proffering. But then there's other kinds of resources too. Have you ever sent an article or some other, or any other kind of thought leadership to a hiring manager? Not even necessarily related to the job. Just because you heard in the conversation that person had a challenge, right? Or the industry was going through something, or the company was going through something, and you saw something online that you thought might be an interesting factoid. I read this statistic, or I saw this article. Hey, here's a blog post. Hey, here's a video. Not 5 different things, maybe just one thing. Something that made them see that you were thinking about them, that you cared about them, that you are intellectually curious about things. My goodness, that little extra touch could make all the difference. And then you're no longer just a candidate. You now have a relationship with them. You're thinking about them proactively. So lots of things that you can do. Past experience, future ideas, thought leadership, be creative, okay? So what are some other ways that you could add value? Things that maybe we haven't talked about yet. Just adding value to your network, to employers.
Kira, if we could just go back to the last item. One of the interviews I had recently was with the city government, and they go down a list. There's really no room for wiggle room or for conversation. at the end.
Yeah.
And like in that situation, I felt like all I could do is say, here I am, I'm flexible, I think I could come up to speed.
Yes.
In another situation, just responding to the interview itself, it was a position that required a lot of client contact. So I went back to my volunteer experiences, even way back in high school, where I was a candy striper, and where I volunteered at a health clinic. I volunteered somewhere else, and I brought that up in my follow-up thank you letter. But I'm finding that a lot of the places I'm getting interviews, I don't even have the email of the hiring manager or the person to whom I've spoken.
Yeah.
And waiting on their responses. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So thank you for all of that. First of all, let me just address the last thing that you shared first. You absolutely can ask for the email address. They may not be proactively providing it for you. You absolutely can. First of all, the very least to offer to do a thank you note. So you always will have one person who's going to be a liaison to that company. The recruiter, the hiring, the HR person, somebody, right, is your point of connection, who's doing the scheduling for you. Even if it's administrative assistant, somebody. Ask that person right after the interview, may I have the email address of the hiring manager so I can send a follow-up note? Of course, they're going to say yes, right? Or I'd be shocked if they didn't. And also, if you interview with a panel of people, you can ask for all of their addresses. It's a very, very normal thing to send thank you notes. And that's, of course, how you could send anything else. So not just a thank you note, but any of the resources. But to address the earlier thing you said in terms of the government, that is the tricky one, because the government does tend to be very standardized in how they interview. Yes, it's like, one question, go all the way around the room, and you have to sit there, right, with your hands in your lap, and you can't do much. It is a little tricky. That said, again, if you can get the email addresses, that would be a way to add something. Maybe in your thank you note, you write a little longer thank you note, and you offer some ideas, or you elaborate on your experience a little bit more, or again, share a resource, something, right? That breaks up the tension of that's very strict, standard, rigid kind of a thing. I'm not saying it's the easiest thing in the world. You got to be a little creative with it. But I think as long as you're in that mindset, you'll try to find a way. Like the water will leak through the rocks. You know what I mean? It'll always try to find a way in the river, right? Be of that go-giver mindset. And even in the meeting, maybe there's one sentence you can add, right there at the end, that's just a little bit, more value added than what they were allowing you to do. So this, I guess my point is, if you have the mindset, usually there's some way that you can add the value no matter what the circumstance. So just have that go-giver mindset, okay? What other ways can you add value? And then we'll go on to the next thing. Other ideas?
I think what I find in big organizations is they don't know what else is going on in their organization. So if you network enough and you happen to cross people that are in a different area, and say, did you know Bob over and so-and-so is doing something real similar? And it's almost like, how do you know more about what's going on in my organization? And that just seems to be really kind of something that really kind of catches people attention. And it's surprising how people know about what's going on in an organization.
In a large company, you're right. It's what we call silo bridging, right? Because everybody's in their own little stovepipe, right? In their little silo, and you can actually help cross-pollinate. I think that's great. That's a great idea. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, so we're going to go on to the last one, right? And the last one is showing that you're a trusted resource, very specifically in your accomplishment stories. Now, let me just be clear here. In many interviews, especially with the hiring manager, they want to know your accomplishments, not just your job duties. There's a very big difference. It's why we resume writers are constantly saying, write accomplishment stories in your resume, not just job duties. A lot of people can say, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did that. It's very, very different to tell a story, what I call a once upon a time story. Now there's formulas for this. Some people call it SAR, situation, action, results. Some people call it CAR, challenge, action, result. PAR, problem, action, STAR. A lot of people use STAR, situation, task, action, result. One I like also is called CAB, like a taxi cab, challenge, action, benefit. It's all the same thing, okay? So you're starting out with the backstory. What was the problem, situation, the challenge that the organization was facing? What were the actions that you took? What kind of superhero were you with your cape flying behind you, right? Here are the actions I took to resolve it. And then what were the results, or what were the benefits to the organization? It's a story. And interviewers know that it's really hard for people to fudge one of those stories or to misrepresent anything. A lot of people say, yes, I've done this, and yes, I've done that. But when you're telling a story, there's body language involved. There's tonal inflection involved. It's really hard to lie when you're telling a story, right? Because it's real. That's why people go on a witness stand, right? It's like you tell the story, you want to put yourself there. And an employer can feel it if this is a genuine story, right? Once upon, as if to say, once upon a time in a land far, far away, it was 2 years ago, sky was blue, grass was green, here's what was going on, right? We had this client situation, da, da, da. And I will tell you that the more dramatic the story, the more memorable the story. The more dramatic the story, the more memorable the story. So if you can think about a little bit of a crisis, a dramatic time in your accomplishment stories where you were the trusted resource that other people relied on, those are the stories that are more memorable, okay? So I'm gonna share some questions with you, and then we're actually gonna go into breakout rooms, and I want you guys to talk about this with each other, because I want to help, I wanna create a space here where you can make your stories richer, okay? So not just the generic stuff, but really a really strong example. So here are the questions you want to think about, and you can write these down, but I also would want you to take a picture of this. So when you go in the breakout rooms, you have these questions at hand, right? So make sure you've got the questions ready. In what ways have you helped employers solve their urgent challenges? And not all of the challenges. You could say, in what ways have I helped an employer solve an urgent challenge? Because if you're talking about one story. But this is a really, really great way to start finding your SAR story. What was the urgent challenge? What was going on where I helped them make an impact? Number two, in what ways have your colleagues at work counted on you? This could be part of your story, because nobody works in a vacuum, right? Nobody's on an island. You don't just do your job without anybody else around. You have coworkers. Now, some of you are more engaged with your coworkers than others, but that might have to do with your personality, it might have to do with your job, it doesn't matter. Somebody was relying on you to do something. Weave that into your story, right? There was this client situation, the world was falling down, da, 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 da. I was tasked to do this, and I partnered with this department, or this department came to me and said, hey, Karen, can you help us with blah, blah, blah? And, here's what I did. I dropped everything, or I tapped into this particular resource, or I made a connection, or I this or I that, or whatever. And we really worked as a team. They were able to count on me, and frankly, I was able to count on them, and we did it together. Okay. And then other ways, just in general, thinking about other ways that you can show employers that you've been a trusted resource. You can weave that into your stories. It doesn't have to be just the urgent problem, or colleagues could be something else. But be thinking about, how have I been a trusted resource in my work life, in any company? Go back to that, because at the end of the day, that's why they're hiring you, is to be a trusted resource. They want to be able to count on you. They want you to be able to be there when the chips are down, both to bring your hard skills, your practical functional skills, your marketing skills, your accounting skills, your research skills, whatever it is, and your soft skills. Because I will tell you guys, in interviews, oftentimes that's what makes the difference, is your soft skills. So let me back up a whole step here. The hard skills on your resume often will get you the interview, but the soft skills in your interview will often get you the job. It's two different things. When people are looking at a resume, they're scanning down for those keywords, right? Have you, can you? Cool. That makes it, if you check all those boxes, they're gonna say, great, it's worth my time to interview her. In the interview, guess what? Most everybody that they're interviewing is just as qualified as you are, to varying degrees. Yeah, some of you might have a little more, a little less, But generally speaking, you're only going to get the interview if you're qualified. So are the other 6 people who they're interviewing. What gets you the job? Oftentimes it's the soft skills. How did you show up in the past? How did you partner with your colleagues? What are the soft skills? Was it your analytical skills, your strategic skills, your reliability, your creativity, your ability to solve conflict? There's a million soft skills out there. What do you bring to the table? How can you be, not just what can you do, but how can you be a team player? How can you be a resource? How can you be somebody that they can trust, who's going to go the extra mile, who's going to think broadly, whatever the thing is. There's no soft skills better than another unless it matters to that job. So for example, if you're an accountant, okay, your ability to be detailed and organized and accurate is going to be much more important, I think, than necessarily your ability to be strategic. Not that it's not helpful to be strategic, but that's not necessarily what they're looking for in an accountant. That accuracy is more important than the strategery. You want to go for a vice president job? Sure, being accurate is helpful, but being strategic is much more important. Okay. So I say that because be thinking about your soft skills and how they can add value, right? So here are your 3 questions. And now what I'm going to do is put you guys into breakouts. So give me just a moment here. Okay, and we are going to go in there for 10 minutes. Okay. So just make sure to hit the join button.
Excellent. That sounds like an excellent story
Yeah.
of, something where you ended up being a resource to them that solved a problem that they had. That's excellent. Batia, do you want to take one of the questions and answer that?
I worked for the county health department as a COVID tracer initially, and then as the head of the data entry team. And we had a deadline by June 30th to close out all of the COVID cases from 2020. There were over 40,000 individual records, and I headed a team of, I had 4 people in my department and an additional 8 to 10 other people working on the project. So I coordinated the assignments. And I also identified that there was a gap in the software that Maryland Department of Health had provided us. So it was failing to log who the individuals were who created the particular record. That became relevant because I had no way to account for the productivity of people on my team. Initially, I was curious about how I compared to other members, how many reports I had created. And so because I took initiative, I got in touch with MDH people. They had to change some things on the back end. I was able to get all of these records reconciled 3 weeks early. And unfortunately, I also found out that one of the members of my team had been sandbagging, whereas other people on the team had hundreds of reports created in that time period. She only had 19, which is insane. I had over 1,000. So the urgent challenge that I helped the employers solve was getting those closeout reports, getting them in early, doing them complete. But the managerial aspect that they hadn't built into the system, it was very sad to me that I found that somebody who was on my team, somebody I trusted, needed to be sacked for not doing work. And we all got laid off.
Well, it sounds like you did some problem solving, some analysis regarding what needed to be fixed, and took initiative to actually get it fixed. So those are some great skills that would translate into a new position.
Sure. And training. I trained my
training. Yeah, man, you did a lot of various things that would translate into a new position. And you said that you are getting some interviews?
Finally, yes.
It takes a while sometimes. Is anything looking like it's coming to fruition for you?
Whenever I had customers that called, I would always determine if they're calling about an issue, whether it's a issue by the user, an issue. Let me start from the beginning. I'm sorry. Anybody that called in had to access a training website. So if they had any issues with the training website, I would be on the other end. So I would determine if the issue that they're calling about, if it's a user issue, computer issue, or a website issue before, and if it's a computer issue or if it's a website issue, then I would test it myself before then having my colleagues look into it. So.
Okay.
Are we doing that the right way, Cheryl? We couldn't figure out if you were or not.
We introduced ourselves and then we reiterated the questions
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it's just a matter of jumping. I only caught half the story because I just jumped in, but yeah, it's just a matter of telling the story. And as you're telling the story, try to weave in urgent challenge, how people counted on you, your soft skills, that kind of thing. It's just really framing the story as being a trusted resource. That's the whole point of it, right? And how can you be a trusted resource? You're only a resource if there's a problem that needs to be solved. Otherwise, why would anybody need a resource, right?
Exactly. Makes sense.
if one follows the format for writing the cabs or stars or, you know, all the, they're essentially
Same thing.
the same thing. Is there a way or a template or ideas on how to weave in these questions, weave in the answers to these questions?
Sure. So think of it like, and that we're going to be closing out in 60 seconds. So in the let's do SAR, situation, action, result. Okay. So the situation is the urgent challenge. The action can be, was of course what you did, but the action is really where did others count on you to be that trusted resource, and where you use your soft skills, right? Who you were being, not just what you were doing, who you were being in that situation. And then of course the result is a result, you know, what ended up happening, but it's the situation and the action where you describe the challenge and then the action, what you were doing and who you were being. In fact, I think, Christina, thank you for that question. I think when we get back to the main room, I'll go ahead and reiterate that.
Okay,
Would you, actually, would you mind doing that? Would you mind re-asking the question to me?
Okay.
That would be good. Okay. All right.
So go when we get back.
Okay, thanks. Hey, everyone. Hope you had a good little breakout there. I jumped into a couple of rooms there. And in one of the rooms, my last one, Christina actually had an interesting question for me. I'd like her to re-ask it, and then I'm happy to share it. Christina, what's the question?
Sure. So the question was, you know, if we got the 3 questions that Shira gave us. In what ways have you helped employers? In what ways have your colleagues counted on you? In what ways can you show your benefit to the employer? My question was, as we're writing or crafting our accomplishments in the CAB, STAR, SAR, whatever format, is there a template or a way to weave in the answers to these questions in, you know, in writing out those bullet points?
Yes, it's a great question, Christina. And here's how I would respond to that. Let's just take the SAR formula. So again, they're all the same: situation, action, result. So your situation is where you would talk about the urgent problem that you were solving. The action is where you would talk about where you were the trusted resource in 2 ways: what you were doing and who you were being. What you were doing and who you were being. Most times when people do these stories, all they talk about is, here's what I did. But you want to weave in the who you were being. You want to actually weave in your soft skills. So maybe there's a situation where you needed to be someone who was able to resolve conflict. Maybe you brought up those superpowers that you had: your ability to resolve conflict, your ability to be a negotiator, your ability to be an influencer, your ability to be a great listener, ask probing questions, whatever. So as you're telling your story, almost narrate your own story. Think of it that way, like a movie, okay? Narrate your own story. So once upon a time, here's what was going on. Organization had this big challenge, okay, here's the challenge. Now, here's what happened, right? First, I was thinking to you're narrating. I was thinking to myself, there are different ways we can solve this problem. We can go after it this way, we can go after that. I chose to go after it this way because I was looking through this kind of lens, or I really was thinking about this stakeholder that really was going to be impacted by this thing. So I decided to, then you said go into doing. So first, here's who I was being, right? I was thinking, what was going on, soft skills. Here's what I did. And then this other thing happened, right? There's There's always a domino effect. And then I was thinking, wow, oh, this is interesting. This was a twist. I didn't expect this thing to happen. So now I realized, you know what, there are these two departments that are now involved, and they were having some tension. So I decided to jump in and see if I could mediate, right? Whatever. But the point is that you're showing them who you were, how you're thinking, your emotions involved. That's who they're hiring. They're not hiring a resume. They're hiring a person. You're bringing your whole self to the job. Got it? You're bringing your whole self to the job. Your experiences, your lenses, your emotions, your personality, your identity, everything about you is coming to full bear on this job. It's going to impact your coworkers. It's going to impact your external stakeholders. It's going to impact the senior leadership, everybody. You're going to impact yourself, right? By who you're being. All right. So know yourself, learn about yourself, and then weave that in. I'm telling you, the more genuine you are, the more authentic you are about how you show up in these interviews, the more people are going to understand who they're getting, who their teammate is going to be. What kind of colleague are you going to be? Are you going to play well in the sandbox? Well, it's not just about playing well in the sandbox. We know the sandbox is messy, okay? Lots of sand flying everywhere. But who are you going to be when the chips are down? Who are you going to be, when there's a crisis? Who are you going to be when there's some big problem to be solved? Whatever, or even just the day-to-day, showing up on time, like reliability. There's all these different qualities that need to come to bear. And I'm not saying that you have to talk about all 50 that you have, but I would suggest strongly that when you are listening to the challenges that this employer is sharing with you, think about who you are and how who you are can solve those challenges. Not just your experience, not just the challenge, but literally who you are. And I'll give you an example. I'm working with somebody right now who is he's a senior leader, and he happens to be in association community. I do work with a lot of those folks, and he is a relationship builder's relationship builder. This guy, I mean, like hands down, it's his superpower. And one of the ways that that's manifested is his ability to engage with members, recruit members, retain members, build relationships with members. He would do very, very well in another opportunity where he gets to use his relationship building skills. It's not to say he doesn't have any others. It's not to say he can't do some operations or whatever. But if there's a role out there that's going to require him to be 90% an operations guy and 10% a relationship builder, he's not going to be fulfilled, and they're not going to get the value. So if he is in a relationship building job or in an interview for that kind of a job, man, oh man, he can just pull out all of his soft skills, develop these partnerships, engage these stakeholders, right? Resolve the conflict, influence, all of these things. He could speak to the challenges that role is going to present to him in whatever the relationship is, right? Whatever the needs are of that organization as it relates to engaging stakeholders internally and externally. And he's a relationship builder internally too, building up, his direct reports and building teams and all of these things. So he knows himself. And even going into his job search, he knows that these are the superpowers that he needs to present. Does this make sense, guys? Right? Know yourself, learn about the superpowers that God has given you to make an impact in the world through your work. That's the message. That's the message, right? This is all about service. This is all about giving. This is all about relationship building. It's all about helping people. Yes, you happen to get a paycheck. I get it. When we need to eat, that's great. But it is also just as important as you show up authentically and genuinely and relationally, so that people know that you're more than just about the paycheck, right? That you're really there to make a difference. So with that, we're going to wrap up. 3 minutes to 9:30. If anybody has any questions, happy to answer them. Otherwise, happy to wrap up. Oh, I also want to share with you my contact information if you would like to get in touch. All right, here's how you reach me up here. I also want to put two resources to two different groups that I run, both completely free. The first one is Boomer Works, and that's for any of you who are 50 plus. We accept all ages. We do not discriminate, but it is especially, geared for the 50+ community, people who want to re-career to self-employment. Our website, boomerworks.org, is we have twice monthly programs. We have an educational program, and then a couple weeks later, we have a peer networking group. And we record all of our educational programs, and we have a training center tab. So you can watch all of our videos. We've been doing this for about 1.5 years now. And then Higher Moment Mastermind, few of you on this call join me every week. And it's an open Q&A every Friday morning, 9:15 Eastern to 10:15. And it's just whatever questions you have about your job search. It's myself and a couple other colleagues, and we help answer those questions. And we also offer a short prayer meeting for those of you who would like to stay on for that as well at the end of that call. And here's the meetup link. So if you want to take a picture of this, feel free to go to our meetup site and join us on Friday mornings. Okay. So with that, any other quick questions that I can answer? All right.
Anyone else? Well, Shira, it's been an absolute joy to have you back with us. Thank you for a very informative session. And I love the engagement throughout, particularly the breakout sessions. Lots of good conversations inside of that. So thank you again for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't offer Shira any financial gain for coming here. She just does this out of her own want to help people. And this is something that we can only give back in a couple of ways. One, we can help other people when that opportunity comes about, but two, we can also just share our great gratitude. And if you would take a minute to throw something in the chat window or one of those cool little emojis down there at the